Everyone is Tulip is a Dark Horse indie comic, co-created by Nicole Goux, as well as Dave Baker, with colors by both Nicole herself and Ellie Hall. The story follows the young adult Becca as she explores the next step in her life after she unintentionally becomes a viral avant-garde sensation on social media as her alter ego, Tulip. Within the first few pages of the book, the reader immediately understands how aspects of Becca's life have led her to this out-of-hand scenario, while still feeling unsure and curious enough that they want to see what happens next to this accidental influencer. Becca shows an outspoken resentment for her old life from when she was younger, while also revealing an unspoken affinity for being noticed and being seen. She often spends panels of the book bathing in the soft blue light of her phone, as she watches other social media influencers and persistently compares her social media clout to those of others. When the book fell into my lap, I was already thinking about how social media and apps had been affecting a lot of my life. So, I was really interested in engaging with what the pages had to share. And when I got the chance to read the book, the first thing I fell in love with were the art and colors. And that can sound like a superficial reason to have so much faith in a book. But Ellen and Nicole's work do so much to complement and expand upon the comic's narrative elements. This work is exemplified with the cover of the book. The cover art of Everyone is Tulip shows the two main facets of the main character's life. Her internet persona as Tulip, adorned in flashy and attention-grabbing fashion, even with eye patterns across her dress and jewelry to emphasize how badly she seeks to be seen. And her real life as Becca, a plain girl with a sense of brokenness inside of her so great that you can literally see it all over her face. These details set the stage for some of the central conflicts of the book, but it's the colors that transcends this from a good cover to a phenomenal one, in my opinion. The Tulip identity is colored with pastel shades of cyan and magenta. One could make the argument that this may be a reference to the CMYK palette, a collection of inks typically used for print media, to say that the artist is trying to present Tulip's image as comparable to the cover of a fashion magazine. But regardless of whether this theory is true or not, the cyan tint that dominates Tulip's presence easily alludes to her relationship to social media through the reference to the blue light of phone screens. Meanwhile, Becca on the cover is colored only with monochrome shades of a desaturated version of the same pink from Tulip. It's a color scheme that gives us a glimpse at how Becca sees herself, lacking life and energy, and ending up as a shallow reflection of her more vibrant alter ego. Both of these stylistic elements, from associating the spectacle of social media screens with luminous cyan, to characterizing aspects of Becca's life with monochrome and washed-out colors, come up throughout the book's story. This dichotomy between the phosphorescent pinks and blues and the jaded mauves continue from the cover and bleed into the first few pages of the graphic novel. Within the introductory pages of Everyone is Tulip, we see Becca performing for the first time for her soon-to-be viral video. We can tell by the shade of her dress and the color of the lights on set that the director, Paradox, is deliberately trying to mold Becca into an internet icon through the book's coded relationship between this incandescent shade of blue and social media. And, of course, for as much as Paradox is trying to give Becca this artificial flair about her performance, we can clearly see that his efforts are highly contrasted with the less glossy look of reality, which uses tones and shades that aren't all that dissimilar to Becca's monotone appearance on the cover. In fact, the visual cues that the comic gives to accentuate the difference between the authenticity of reality and the performance people present for social media are probably my favorite things about the book. A subtle but notable detail is that when Becca is performing and disappearing into her role as Tulip, the lettering of the comic panel changes. When the characters are living in quote-unquote reality, their carriers and text tend to be either black or the same shade of washed out shades of purple that we saw from Becca's cover. However, whenever there are carriers and text for screens, that's when we tend to see the familiar cyan we've come to associate with social media. So when the reader turns to the second page of the very first chapter, they get the chance to watch as Becca code switches and transforms into Tulip. The director gives some guidance on her performance, and we watch as Becca internalizes the lines and disappears for a moment until Tulip is all that's left over. Why, just this double-page spread of Becca becoming Tulip for the first time is fascinating. We can tell that it's an authentic transformation based on the lettering's blue colors, compared to other times when Becca tries to simulate her Tulip persona with a lot more difficulty. And just the way that the tail from her speech bubble visually flows out of her mouth really conveys the sense that this is a natural and artistic performance from Becca. This book is just such a lovely example of how lettering can really empower a story's execution. Now, this isn't to say that the entire comic is just about contrasting bright blues and dimmed pinks with each other for the sake of emphasizing the difference between real life and internet life. These two lives that people can live aren't always at odds with each other in the comic. The real lives of other characters still enjoy a wide array of vibrant colors, and the tones are just so delightful that I feel like it really captures that sort of movie magic people tend to expect from Los Angeles. But even despite how beautiful and pleasant each California lifestyle can look all on their own, I can't help but admit that they're very nicely complemented by the bright cyan hues that light up when a phone gets a message or a character sends a text. The colors of both worlds just come together and make each other look better. And a nice takeaway I had from this was that it's a healthy reminder that, for as draining as social media can be at times, in small doses, it really can complement shots of our lives very nicely. Another thing I could just go on and on about is how the comic integrates screens into its pages. The comic has so many small stylistic elements that both form a cohesive aesthetic for the book's page layout, as well as remind the reader of just how seamlessly we've come to interact with smartphones ourselves. It takes advantage of the reader's literacy with apps and texting and integrates it into the plot scenes to demonstrate and remind to the reader that we very often live in two worlds as we go about our day-to-day lives. But I'd rather give other readers the opportunity to explore this facet of the book's reading experience for themselves. Dave and Nicole spent nearly 5 years developing this project, and it has a level of detail and thought put into its pages that show the commitment they had for the book. I genuinely didn't expect to find myself liking this comic so much. It even includes an article from Dave that both contextualizes the story with the behind-the-scenes work that went into developing the book, as well as give the reader an opportunity to really reflect on what it's like to make a product and watch it reach fulfillment. Who knows what amazing events or opportunities or connections this book will make? It will have a life all its own. Everyone is Tulip releases in comic shops on June 16th, and in general bookstores on June 29th.